All right, everybody, this is Sheets, and we're going to be going over the Survivor analysis for week 2. Again, each week I'm going to just kind of review what's important, and, hopefully you missed the first week where I went over pretty much everything that's important. You should go back and watch that on video. But remember that when you're dealing with Survivor pool selections, you want to consider two things, pretty much. We'll get to the third thing as we get down, weeks down the road. But you're looking at immediate EV and future value, okay? And remember, immediate EV is made up of the combination of a team's winning chances and as a function of its popularity, because just taking the team with the biggest winning percentage isn't going to help if everybody else is taking them too. So that's the first thing, is making sure that is immediate EV. And the second component is future value, that you don't want to take a team now that you're going to be able to use later with great effect. And we went over a couple of situations that you could look to in kind of future weeks. And for those of you that that didn't watch, remember we gave San Francisco, what was it, week 9 as an example. Let's look at, what was the week we gave an example? Was it week 11, week 12, was it week 13? There was one where one team was a significantly bigger favorite over anybody else. Yeah, so like this one. So New Orleans in week 7 rates to be a 13-point favorite over Carolina, which will be a 6-point advantage over the next one. So the New Orleans people will have significant edge. So if you were ever tempted to use New Orleans earlier in the year, like let's say week 5, it would be a really, really terrible play, because you'd prefer to use them in a week where you have more leverage, over everybody else. There was another week that I had a good example, but I kind of forgot what it was. But that's what you have to look for when you're looking at future value as well. It's not just the raw value of the team later in the season, but also the possible leverage you have. Oh, so this one, like for example, so in week 14, San Francisco rates to be a 4-point favorite in excess of the next one. So San Francisco, you want to make sure you have San Francisco in week 14. So as an example, even though they might be a decent play in week 5, you want to eschew them in week 5 for the use of week 14. Now, you might think, how am I going to worry about week 14 if I can't get through week 5? That's just not the way you're supposed to think about these things. You're really supposed to try to win the whole thing and presume, at least for a little while, this thing is going to go all the way to the end. So you do have to kind of think out in the future just kind of a little bit. So like week 5, these were good examples. So week 5, you didn't want to use New Orleans because, again, you could use them later with that leverage spot. And you didn't want to use San Francisco. And also, I don't think that you want to use Baltimore either. I think there was a good spot that you can use Baltimore with some good leverage too. Yeah, so like in week 15, Baltimore would be 4 points better, bigger favorite than the next one. So you want to say Baltimore for week 15. So we go back to this week 5, which is going to be a pretty important week. Is Baltimore is going to be a terrible play in week 5, not because it has bad winning chances, probably the most likely winner, but you're just going to want them much more in week 15. And likewise, San Francisco is going to be a bad play, 14 in 5, because we wanted them, where was it? Right here in 14. And then also Kansas City would be a bad play because you could use them pretty much anywhere out in the future. And New Orleans, we talked about, they're not going to be, you can use them. What was it going to be? Where was it going to be? Was it week 10? Where was New Orleans? Well, you'll recall, you'll look back and you'll see what I said. I can't quite find it right now. Yeah, this one, week 11. So they're going to be a bad play in week 5. And these are the top 4 EV teams are just going to be bad plays. So you're going to probably end up getting all the way down to Houston to be efficient. And, you know, you might think that you did the wrong thing if all these teams win. Okay, so what did I gain? Okay. Now, again, that's the worst case scenario with everybody winning. But again, what you've done is you picked up EV over all these guys. You just don't quite, you just can't see it yet. You know what I mean? Because we're not at those pivotal weeks later where you're going to be able to cash in on that leverage. Okay. So that's just an example. It doesn't have anything to do with this week, but that's the way you think about survivor, you know, survivor pool theory. And week 5 is going to be that week where you have to do this. Dallas, you know, they could be another decent play in week 5. Atlanta. So like these are the places you're going to go in week 5, not these big favorites. But we're not at week 5 yet. We're at week 2 now. For those of you that followed my advice, week 1 was to fade a couple of the chalk plays, and you know they did a little bit of damage. Indianapolis lost, San Francisco lost. I think someone else lost too, and you know, a decent amount of the pools got crushed week 1. I'm in one pool which is particularly ornery that has double picks weeks 1 and 2 because they were afraid that COVID was going to knock out the season early, so they wanted to get people out. So one of the pools I'm in, like a third of the people are left, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, week 2, there are a couple of options, and this is really just basic, honestly basic stuff. A site like this, like Survivor Grid, I mean, they do so much of the work for you, and as long as you're, you know, are really good at mapping, which is what I was talking about earlier with planning out your picks for the future. I mean, making good survivor picks is not that difficult. The only tricks you really run into, again, is when you get too hung up on, boy, I don't think the line should be this, or I would play this except they're a division rival or whatever it is. You really shouldn't, you know, put that type of spin on most any selection. So let's go through this. Let's just cheat. Let's just rank these by immediate EV because they do this work for you. What they do is they take the winning percentage, probably based on a median or an average of the pinnacle lines. The you know, the favorite line, the average from the favorite line and the underdog line for each game, and they come up with these winning percentages. And then what they do is they take this popularity number from, they poll the main survivor sites, which are Yahoo. It's actually not that big of one. Run Your Pool, which is pretty big, and Office Football Pool, which is by far the biggest. And you can look at the popularity for either of these things on their own or as an average. And what they do is they combine this all into this EV, which is a function of winning percentage and popularity. So I did mention that in this particular year of COVID, I think future value plays less of a role than usual, right? Because that's always the thing that's unquantifiable, is how much do you weight immediate EV as opposed to future value? And I think with all the uncertainty related to COVID, like the possibility that key players can become sick or entire teams can have to sit out games, which would really throw a monkey in the wrench, so to speak. I do think that immediate EV takes on even a bigger role, but future value still has to be respected. Both from a pure perspective, meaning, you know, don't burn a team if you have a lot of options later, and also especially don't burn a team if you have a specific leverage spot for them later as well. So, but let's just look. You know, the top immediate EV team is going to be Kansas City at 1.09, but they have just incredible amount of future value. You know, because they're Kansas City. You're gonna be able to use them so many times that it's just not it's really not a good idea to probably use them now. Likewise, Tampa's a pretty good play. They are the second biggest EV, and they have some future value, but not that big of a deal, you know. Nothing particularly off the charts, so they're probably the best play. Tennessee is, you know, even though, again, they're a bigger favorite than Tampa, they are slightly more popular, which is why their EV is a little lower. And their future value is very similar to Tampa's, maybe a little bit, you know, less future value. So I regard Tampa and Tennessee as probably equal. Baltimore is a terrible play because it's got the same EV as Tampa and Tennessee, but it's got just an insane amount of future value. So you don't want to use them. So Tampa and Tennessee are the best plays. And then you can come down to these others, which are, you know, these are fine. These secondary EV plays like Pittsburgh, Arizona, Cleveland, and Chicago. What's good about them is they have very little future value, with Pittsburgh probably being the worst of the plays, I think. Actually, it's close. They do have a little bit better immediate EV, but their future value is a little bit higher than Arizona, Cleveland, and Chicago. So I guess these would be a clear, I don't know, these four teams probably, I don't know if I can really separate them. I think they're definitely second tier, but you could certainly use them. You know, there'd be very aggressive type plays just because of the lack of popularity, specifically the Cleveland and Chicago play. You know, because, yeah, the popularity is already factored into the EV, but just if you want to be super aggressive, you want to go for the lower owned plays. So Cleveland, Chicago would be the aggressive plays of the second tier, with Pittsburgh being a little bit of the chalkier play. So for me, I did have a good week last week. I didn't bust a single survivor entry. I basically ended up going 50% New England and 50% Pittsburgh, and they all survived pretty handily, actually. So I'm gonna probably, in my single pick survivor pools, gonna go mostly Tampa and Tennessee. I don't know if I want to go super aggro with Pitt, Arizona, or Cleveland, or Chicago. Although, again, I'm not gonna kill you if you do this. The only thing you really do bad this week is if you take Kansas City or Baltimore. Those are the two kind of fish plays. Anything else I said is probably fine. I mean, I'm not gonna kill you if you play any of these guys. I'm probably gonna end up with mostly Tampa and maybe mostly Tampa and Tennessee, I think. And again, it is scary because you're getting like really the two worst coaches in the history of football. I shouldn't say that. Arians is pretty bad, and what's his name? The Tennessee guy who didn't call timeouts over the week was oh no, it was the other guy who didn't call the timeout. Sorry. So Tennessee coach wasn't that bad. But again, all that stuff is factored in to the win price. So don't get too narrative driven and put your own spin on why a team shouldn't be trusted. That's already factored in. So I guess that's pretty much it. So to recap, don't play Kansas City or Baltimore. Tampa, Tennessee would be my top two picks, certainly on the conservative side. Then if you want to be aggro, you could go with Arizona, Cleveland, or Chicago and be in good shape. And Pittsburgh as well. Okay, that's about it. Good luck this weekend.